Thanks so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Lori Johnson. A winter storm continues to batter the south and northeast. A strong cold front dumped more than 20 inches of snow on parts of Kentucky and more than 11 inches on parts of Maryland. The late winter storm left hundreds of drivers stranded on highways and thousands of customers without power. Charlene Aaron has the story.
Winter is still gripping much of the country, from New England to Texas. Massive gridlock was the scene in Kentucky Thursday, with some drivers stranded for more than 16 hours on Interstate 65. Heavy snow causing a 20-mile-long backup. The National Guard was called in to help motorists stranded for hours get food and warmth. This mom was forced to spend most of the night in the car with her son.
Thankfully, the truck driver ahead of us brought us water so we could make bottles.
In Tennessee, a group of passengers on a megabus from Atlanta to Chicago spent much of Thursday looking for a warm place to rest after their bus broke down thanks to dangerous road conditions. And there was this close call at New York's LaGuardia Airport. A Delta plane from Atlanta with 127 passengers skidded off the runway while landing. The plane crashed through a fence, coming to rest with its nose just feet away from the freezing water on the bay.
My first thought was, I hope we stop before the water.
There was skidding in Rhode Island, too, where one vehicle slid into another and a driver knocked down. The federal government shut down in Washington, D.C. School districts and government offices and businesses in dozens of states were also forced to close because of the winter conditions. For many, bone-chilling temperatures came after a brief warm-up earlier in the week.
We left the house this morning, it was 52 degrees. Now it's 34, dropping, ice on the way.
With so many frustrated by this unrelenting winter, it's good to know warmer weather is expected next week. And spring is just 2 weeks away. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
The court battles over gay marriage are coming to a final conclusion. The United States Supreme Court will rule on gay marriage by July. Thursday, we learned the High Court will hear the case April 28th. It comes from the Cincinnati-based 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the only federal appellate court to uphold state bans on same-sex marriages. Lawyers on both sides will get 90 minutes to argue whether homosexual couples have a constitutional right to marry everywhere in the United States. Another hour will be devoted to question whether states must recognize same-sex unions performed elsewhere.
The Georgia Senate has passed a new religious freedom bill. The measure would forbid the state government from infringing on a person's religious beliefs unless the government can prove it has compelling interest. Opponents say the bill would be used for discrimination against the LGBT community, but its sponsor says that hasn't happened in other states with similar laws.
An Israeli Arab terrorist plowed his vehicle into 4 border police women in Jerusalem today.
The driver then got out of the car, apparently holding a knife. He was shot by guards and seriously wounded. The police women are expected to be okay. The incident happened in front of the Border Police headquarters. Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld told CBN News after hitting the women, the terrorist continued driving 500 feet up the road.
There were security guards and a border policeman that saw the vehicle, stopped the vehicle, and then what happened was the suspect came out of the vehicle with a knife. He attempted to stab them, and the terrorist was shot at the scene twice, taken to hospital in serious condition. Since the incident itself, the terrorist attack itself, heightened security is continuing in Jerusalem, taking into consideration that it's also the Purim festival today. But there were no specific indications or intelligence that there was going to be a terrorist attack here in Jerusalem today.
The attack took place in the same area where 2 other deadly vehicular terror attacks happened in the last 6 months.
After his speech to Congress, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned home to a fierce election campaign and some unexpected praise. Here's CBN News' Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem.
While in the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu received a warm welcome and much praise. Now that he's back home, the question is, will it make a difference in the upcoming national election? In what some term the speech heard round the world, Netanyahu made a strong case against Iran. Now some Israeli political analysts say the performance helped his party's chances, but a lot could happen before voters go to the polls in less than 2 weeks.
Voters who have voted Likud in the past and now are not sure, that would be an important help for him. setting the agenda on security issues. I don't think it clinches the election for him. There's still a long way to go.
According to one poll after the speech, the Likud gained 2 seats. It also showed 44% of Israelis believe Netanyahu is most qualified to be prime minister. While the two main parties remain far apart on issues like economics, the rivals agree on the Jewish state's biggest threat.
There is not much difference between Herzog and Labour and Netanyahu and Likud when it comes to the negotiations with Iran.
Surprisingly, many commentators from the Gulf Arab nations stood shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu's warning to the U.S. and criticized President Obama's negotiations with Iran, a country they consider a mortal enemy. One influential Arab commentator called President Obama the ally of political Islam, which is the mother of all the terrorist organizations. And he wrote, "I am very glad of Netanyahu's firm stance and his decision to speak against the nuclear agreement at the American Congress. I believe that Netanyahu's conduct will serve our interests, the people of the Gulf, much more than the foolish behavior of one of the worst American presidents." And an Israeli analyst added that Netanyahu's speech assured Sunni Arab peoples and governments that Israel will hold the line even if America fails us on Iran. While control of the Knesset is at stake in the upcoming election, the results will be felt throughout the region and around the world. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
ISIS militants continue their path of destruction in Iraq, this time bulldozing the site of the ancient Assyrian city of Nimrud using heavy military vehicles, according to government officials. Last week, they destroyed ancient artifacts at a museum in Mosul, and last year, the tomb of the prophet Jonah. Meanwhile, ISIS continues spreading its terrorist doctrine and recruiting through social media. A recent study by the Brookings Institute found there are nearly 50,000 Twitter accounts operating on behalf of ISIS. Most of them were created in 2014.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says the city's public school system will close for 2 Muslim holidays next year. They're the first Islamic holidays recognized by the nation's largest school system, which includes more than 1 million children. De Blasio says the move means that hundreds of thousands of Muslim families will no longer have to choose between sending their children to school or observing the Islamic holidays.
A new bill has been introduced in Congress to allow asylum for persecuted homeschooling families. The bill would let families like the Romkeys find a home in the U.S. The Romkeys were fined and treated harshly in Germany for their decision to homeschool. They sought refuge in the U.S. but were almost deported after a U.S. court denied their attempt to seek asylum. They're still in the U.S. for now, but the problem remains. So the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and several members of Congress have created a bill to allow up to 500 grants of asylum to persecuted homeschool families. HSLDA's Director of Global Outreach, Michael Donnelly, says a country that bans homeschooling is violating the basic human rights of their citizens. It makes me proud that our Congress is willing to make this statement like this, that this right should be recognized and protected.
Coming up, what your doctor doesn't know about heart disease and why that information may save your life. Turning to health news now, statin drugs, which people take to lower their cholesterol, could increase a person's risk of type 2 diabetes by 46%. That's the finding from a new study from Finland that followed nearly 9,000 men for about 6 years. The researchers said statins appear to increase the risk of diabetes in several ways, including increasing someone's insulin resistance. But the study authors did point out the research was only conducted on white men, so the finding may not necessarily apply to women or other ethnic groups. Some experts believe the benefits of statins still outweigh the risks. One told Health Day News that each doctor and patient have had to discuss and weigh the risk and benefits to decide the proper treatment.
Well, heart disease is America's #1 killer, but what causes it? First, doctors blamed cholesterol. Then we heard that only bad cholesterol was the problem, and now some cardiologists are changing their diagnosis again. In the fight for better health, Americans view cholesterol as public enemy #1. Doctors tell us to stay away from food high in saturated fat like butter, eggs, and meat because it's responsible for heart disease. But what if that's wrong?
You know, cholesterol is found at the scene of the crime for heart disease, but it's not the perpetrator.
Cardiologist Stephen Sinatra and a growing number of physicians believe cholesterol does not cause heart disease. They point the finger at inflammation, which can be caused by eating too much sugar. Sinatra admits a small fraction of cholesterol is bad because it's inflammatory, but for the most part, it's good for you.
Cholesterol many times can be a gift in disguise, a higher cholesterol.
In his new book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, Sinatra explains that since half of all patients hospitalized for heart disease have high cholesterol, that means the other half have low cholesterol.
I was doing angiograms on people with cholesterols of 150, and they had far advanced heart disease. And the converse, I would do an angiogram on somebody with cholesterols of 280, and they had no heart disease.
Since high cholesterol gets the blame from most doctors, they prescribe cholesterol-lowering statin drugs to their patients with it. But Sinatra says only a small percentage actually need the drug. He only prescribes statins to middle-aged men with coronary heart disease, like Albert Tays.
Other than getting older, I'm not feeling any worse for wear.
Sinatra says a small percentage of women can also benefit from statins as an anti-inflammatory, not to lower cholesterol. But he says for many statin users, the risks outweigh the gains.
The side effects of statins are grossly underreported. I mean, grossly underreported.
Muscle pain and fatigue are two key complaints.
Doc, I can't get out of a chair anymore. I have weakness in my thighs. I can't play doubles tennis. I walk the dog and I'm vitally exhausted. These are statin side effects. However, a lot of the doctors or the patients think they're getting older. They're not getting older. These are statin side effects.
Patients over 70 are especially vulnerable.
They can't remember names. They can't remember where they put their glasses or keys. They forget sometimes who they are. If you do take a statin, it can actually bring on the onset of Alzheimer's disease by 15 years. So you got to be cautious with statins.
So while statins may or may not be right for you, one thing is certain. Reducing inflammation is good for your heart no matter who you are. The best way to do that is cut back on sugar.
You know, cholesterol is sort of your friend. Sugar is your foe. It's the villain. It's your enemy.
Sugar damages arteries, increases blood pressure, and ages your organs. And we're not just talking about soda and candy, but also food that turns into sugar as soon as you eat it. Refined carbohydrates like white bread, white pasta, and white rice. 68-year-old Joan Jackson is living proof that a low-sugar diet improves your heart. At one point, she needed a heart transplant, but after changing her diet and lifestyle, Joan was taken off the transplant list.
I feel great. I'm not going to say I'm 16, but I feel great at my age. I feel I can do anything and accomplish anything I want to.
Her secret? Good old-fashioned self-control.
We have a tendency of saying, oh, I want that last piece of pie, or I'm going to have this piece of candy. But sometimes you have to say no.
Dr. Sinatra describes his healthiest patients as those who avoid sugar and refined carbohydrates and, get this, fill up on fats. He highly recommends unsaturated fats like nuts, avocados, fish, and olive oil. He even touts saturated fats like unprocessed meat and coconut oil.
Coconut oil is a saturated fat. Because it's a saturated fat, it's less prone to oxidation. So it really protects you.
But stay away from trans fat, which is man-made and added to most packaged foods.
I call trans fats unguided missiles that really cause enormous inflammation of blood vessels.
Remember to pay close attention to the ingredients in your food. The word hydrogenated is your red flag because that means trans fat.
So while doctors may disagree about whether cholesterol causes heart disease, one thing is certain: if you go easy on sugar and trans fats, you're headed in the right direction.
Wow. Good stuff. And Dr. Sinatra was actually on the 700 Club yesterday.
He was on the 700 Club, and it was a great interview. This topic really touches everyone's life, and he gave so much wonderful information. If you missed it, I would highly recommend you go to our website, cbn.com, and you can watch yesterday's 700 Club. He was on, if you just wanted to scroll to his interview, he was on at about 15 minutes after the top of the hour, and he gave a lot of great information, again, pointing out that it's really not cholesterol that causes heart disease, that it's the inflammation, and inflammation comes from eating too much sugar and those refined carbohydrates, those white foods that don't taste sweet but turn into sugar just as soon as you eat them.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. He's written a book as well.
Yeah, this is, you know, I've been a medical health reporter for so many years, and I would have to say this is the best book I have ever read for people, because, and this is written by Dr. Stephen Sinatra, The Great Cholesterol Myth. So if you're on a statin, or if you know someone is, or you're concerned about your cholesterol and what's going on there, it's a very controversial subject. This answers all the questions. And, you know, talking about sugar, there's so much hidden sugar in things. I saw a protein shake the other day that looked so healthy, had 44 grams of sugar in it. One protein shake had this much sugar. So read the labels. You want to stay under 2 grams of sugar per serving.
Indeed. All right. That is good information. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Up next, looking for a good date movie this weekend, we've got reviews for you for the second best exotic Marigold Hotel and Old Fashioned. It's just ahead.
The lead singer for the Christian band Casting Crowns has announced doctors believe he has cancer. Mark Hall reports doctors found a mass in his right kidney, and they're 90% sure it is cancerous. They're going to remove his kidney next Wednesday, March 11th, and Hall is asking friends and families to pray for his healing and for peace for his family. He writes on Facebook, they believe the cancer is contained in the kidney, which is also a great hope, and he signed his note saying, "Praising him in this storm," a reference to one of the Casting Crowns' top songs, "Praise You in This Storm."
The weekend is here, and perhaps you're looking for some family entertainment at the theater. Here with our weekly movie review is Bob Waliszewski from Plugged In Online. That is the entertainment review department at Focus on the Family. Bob, let's talk about the second best exotic Marigold Hotel. Not a film for children, but what about couples looking for a good date movie?
What a long title, by the way. And this is the follow-up of 2011, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Rated PG-13, I might add. We were no fans of that one. This one's rated PG. It has some possibility. Dev Patel, he's the young man that was in Slumdog Millionaire, has been pretty successful with his hotel, which is really more of a retirement center in India for the more well-to-do. Their money's going to go further in India. And Maggie Smith's character is helping him connect with some American investors so that he can expand his retirement center at least to a second hotel. But this film is more about the relationships, some people that we met in the first one, and where they're going. Now, overall, this film has one of the most positive vibes of any film that I've seen in a long while. I mean, it's kind of there's just a sense of joy here and just an uplift. The scenes of India, which I've been privileged to visit, are just beautiful. By the way, they're never quite that beautiful in India. There's a lot of litter. You don't see that in this film. But we gave this one a 3. Now, here's why. You have to measure the positive with the fact that there's some relationships here that, although there's nothing explicit on camera, nor is there any risque dialogue, you know that their relationship is not grounded, can I say, biblically. Disappointing. So we knocked it down a couple points. We still gave it a 3, kind of right on the bubble there for families. Potentially, some families will enjoy it, some families will want to stay away. So a 3 out of 5 for this PG-rated film this time around.
All right, that's new this week. Is there anything playing in the theaters now that families may want to consider?
Oh, great question. McFarland USA comes to mind. It's been out for a couple weeks. We talked about Old Fashioned when 50 Shades of Grey on Valentine's Day weekend. It's still playing in CBN universe, 54 theaters. That's not very many. It's about ready to go away, but there's some people watching today that have a chance to go see that one. And Still Alice, for an older teen on up, this Julianne Moore story about Alzheimer has potential. At least folks will want to check out the longer review and see what we're trying to talk about. We gave it a 3.5.
All right, Bob, thanks a lot.
You bet, Ephraim.
And finally this hour, journalists and historians continue their work to trace the life of Jesus in the second installment of Finding Jesus, Faith, Fact, Forgery. The second episode of the 6-part documentary airs on CNN this weekend. This installment also takes a look at the relic with possible ties to John the Baptist. It also features journalist David Gibson. Gibson is the author of the book with the same title. Here's a sneak peek at Sunday's episode.
He hopes to date the carbon inside the bone and perhaps even get a DNA profile. Okay. With limits to how far he can drill, he can't be sure they've got enough to determine whether this bone could have belonged to John the Baptist.
The series has been called CSI Jerusalem, and we have more about it on our website, including an interview with the lead consultant on the series. That's CBNNews.com.
I think I might want to check that out.
Very much.
All right, well, that's it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at CBNNews.com.
We'd like to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Make it a fabulous Friday, everyone.